Good evening and welcome to Our World Hour of Power. Well, I'm back for another week and we have some interesting topics today. We have Stephen James, our attorney at law, and Dr. George Onuorah, who we're going to be talking about politics and other stuff that's been going on this week in the media.
Yes.
Who wants to start off?
Well, praise God. Brother George is back with us again to impart much of that political wisdom and theses that he is known for and quite eloquently projects to the public. So we're definitely grateful that we have him here on our show to bring him to our audience for sure. So thank you, brother, for being here.
Thank you, Pauline.
You're quite welcome. I'm glad to have you. I
then,
know our mayor. I want to start off with our mayor.
De Blasio.
Yes, he's going to be running for president, and he's getting kind of a backlash right now, which is very interesting. What is your take on the subject?
Wow. So you know what they say? If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Wow.
And for De Blasio, he's really someone that has been immersed in politics for a while. In 2000, he ran the Hillary Clinton for Senate campaign. He's a progressive. He's really fixated on moving up the political ladder. So, but on one hand, I'm surprised that he came out at this lying minute. You already have 22 candidates in the Democratic Party running, and he's now the 23rd candidate.
23rd announced
23rd
candidate.
announced
Who
candidate.
knows who's waiting in the wings still,
Yes.
George?
So I know he's somewhere in Iowa or
Yes.
campaigning, pressing the flesh. And for once, I don't know if you know, I went to school in Marshalltown, Iowa.
No,
In
No, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either, good people.
When I came
We're
to-
learning this all together.
When I came to United States in 1981, I landed in August 22nd, 1981 in Iowa, Marshalltown, Iowa. I stayed there for 3 years before moving to New York. So I'm familiar with Iowa, Waterloo, Dubuque, all those things. So,
Wow.
Oh, wow.
yeah. So
Wow.
I have a bird's eye view.
You wet your
What is
feet
going to-
in
yeah.
the United States by living in Iowa,
Yeah, Iowa.
of all places.
Yeah.
How did, just very quickly, tell us the backstory. How did you end up coming from the wonderful continent to the United States to Iowa?
It was a coincidence. I have a cousin that was going to school in Iowa. So when I applied for college, he sent me the form I-20 for me to apply. I didn't know the difference between Iowa and New York.
Right.
So he was willing to have someone else come and join him because he's very lonely. We were about maybe 6 African Americans in the whole town, Marshalltown Community College. So when I came, he was very happy. And Iowa, of course, is rural and a farm country, very conservative. And when I came, I studied mass communication at Marshalltown Community College. I was writing for the Iowa Times Republican, a newspaper. I wrote 3 articles.
Okay.
I was paid $12.
Oh,
article?
wow. All right.
$12.
Per article?
Go ahead
And
for
they
the
gave me a check,
$12.
And he did it in check with taxes taken out.
It's really something else,
Did you frame it, George? Did you frame it? That check?
That was like, wow, I didn't even mind, but I just wanted to write. I wrote about educational system in Nigeria, marriage, and things like that.
Of
And
course.
it was like a big thing for me, but the most important thing is really getting to know the people and be able to familiarize yourself with different culture and traditions. So that was really something that I take back. But coming to New York, it was like a different world.
Yes.
When I came to New York, I was like, what is this? It's really
Faster.
big. Yeah.
Not rural, but urban.
Urban.
Buildings, not farms. I mean, it's just a whole. You made a leap
Yeah.
from something that was extremely the opposite of New York into the biggest,
the-
fastest city in the
In
world.
the world, it was amazing. The subway was like
Amazing.
so many people
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah.
And while I was in Iowa, I was working in a pizza place. I was getting $3 an hour. And I do like about 2-3 hours of work,
Right.
washing dishes. That's what I did.
Just
While I
as a
went to
disclaimer, the minimum wage in 1981 in America was $2.35.
$2, yeah. So
And 35 cents. So
And 35 cents.
you were paid above minimum wage, just to keep it in perspective with people.
So it's interesting, you know.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I want to go back to our mayor, and I also want to talk about the assistant mayor. I take it that
Lieutenant Mayor?
Deputy mayor.
Deputy.
Deputy.
Yeah,
Deputy mayor, oh,
deputy,
okay.
yes.
Assistant mayor, I like that.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Anyway, he, if the mayor's away and campaigning, which he's going to have to do.
He's doing it today.
Yeah, he is. He's not here in New York City.
Correct.
So who's running the ship, George?
The mayor says that even though he's not in New York, that he still keeps in touch abreast of what's going on. But they have this deputy mayor who is supposed to be, overseeing what else is there. But of course, even Bloomberg, while he was the mayor, used to jet away, leave the city and so on, and it was a big controversy. Where was he, this and that, but it always happened. Probably not much. There might be one incident here or there. There's always someone to fill in, and the mayor can get on the plane and come back and do a press conference and go back to Iowa or New Hampshire. So government has a way of systematically continuing to function even though the person in charge might not be there. That's how government is designed.
So you're saying that when Donald Trump is off and playing golf somewhere with Tiger Woods or whomever, that the country is still being run?
Yeah, the country is being run. You have a vice president, and that,
Right.
does some of the things. And besides, you have secretaries of state, Mike Pompeo, whether he's in...
So the way it's structured, you're saying, is structured in a way that no one person will stop the show.
Yes, no one person is that indispensable that we can function as a democracy.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I started to feel very unsafe, being that he wasn't going to be here in New York.
And that his focus was not on
Yes.
New York, but on the national stage.
I know, and that's a lot of people's concern.
Yeah, he's not focused on the pothole that my car hit this morning.
Oh, he did?
Well, theoretically. He's not focused on the pothole your car hit this morning. He's focused on his campaign and the national scene. Because if you're running for president, you want to be, as I think the great Donald Trump once said, president of everybody.
Everybody, yeah. Politics is really something, it makes for a strange bedfellow, as they say. But it looks like he really thinks that, he has a shot.
Right.
And at some point, I don't know if you know, Governor Cuomo was
Considering it.
running,
Yeah, I'm aware of
but
that
I
as
don't
well.
know, for some reason, you have Kirsten Gillibrand from New York
The
running.
New York senator.
Yes, the senator from upstate.
Right.
And you have...
Who was
of course,
initially
the president.
appointed by once Lieutenant Governor and then Governor
Yes.
Patterson, David
So
Patterson
replace
appointed
Hillary,
her.
yes.
That's right.
Hillary Clinton. So you
Correct.
have so many New Yorkers running, but the thing is like the field is so crowded that I don't even know how you begin to sift the rubble. But looking at the opinion polls that is latest, you have Joe Biden at 35%, Bernie Sanders
Yep.
at 19 or 17, and then you have the senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, Elizabeth Warren, yes.
The third person, and then you have Beto O'Rourke.
Beto
somewhere
O'Rourke,
there,
yeah. It's like as soon as they come out with their announcement, they get a big, massive push for publicity. We learned a little bit about them, like Beto O'Rourke and others like that. The guy from Indiana, I think his name is Battaglia. Yeah, that guy. Right, that guy, right, whose biggest claim to fame, in addition to being, I think, a governor, was that he's openly gay candidate.
Yes.
So, he had his 5 minutes of fame. And then, of course, Biden came out, and he's a known entity, having served as a senator, U.S. senator for years, and then, of course, vice president for 8 years under Barack Obama. Yeah. So you have all these people who are out there, and I don't even think we named 25% of them yet. Yeah. We named like 5 people, and still another 15 or 20 left. Still sitting out. That's right, left, and that's of declared candidacy. We don't know about people who might be sitting home saying, you know what, I think I'm going to run for president. I worked 6 weeks in Burger King. I think I'm going to run for president.
What about the geographics? Now, I remember when de Blasio was running for mayor, and all in this, he was way behind. Okay?
Yes.
And because we thought Quinn was going to be
The next
mayor.
mayor.
to succeed.
And then
Bloomberg.
all of a sudden there was this commercial that came out, and you saw him with his wife and his son and his daughter. And then I was like, oh my goodness.
That's who he is.
Yes, that's who he is. And he's married to a black woman.
Right.
And he has interracial children.
He has black children.
Yes, black children, yes.
Right.
I was like, oh my God. So then you saw him pick up
Momentum,
Yes.
his candidacy, and his positioning in the race all of a sudden overtook everybody.
Yes, it did.
Come on.
You forgot that even before then, Anthony Weiner was going
Oh,
to be
yeah.
the one. A lot of people had high hopes, and he was really up there. But he was immersed in some scandal.
He likes to sabotage himself.
Yes.
So he put himself in prison.
Yeah. So,
Well, that's-
but, he's out now. He
Yeah.
came out a few days ago.
A few days ago,
Yeah,
yes, I
halfway
saw.
house and,
Yeah. Now he's, he has to be on probation for
X amount
X
of
amount of
years,
years.
register as a
Sex
sex
offender.
offender, and his thing has gone up in flames.
So I want to ask you
Self-sabotage.
something, Stephen.
Yes.
Being that you are an attorney,
Mm-hmm.
is there any way that he can make a comeback?
Anthony Weiner?
Yes.
No,
Okay.
he's done for. Not because he was a bad, what was he, a representative? State
He was a
representative?
congressman.
He was a congressman?
Forest Hills.
Because for the period that he was in Congress, I was doing international law in another country.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but not because he was a bad congressman, which apparently some say he was. Not because he was married to the first assistant, if I may borrow your term,
Yes.
to Hillary Clinton, Uba Amadin. Not because he was married to her and that marriage went up in flames, but because the nature of his crimes were so egregious. I mean, he was actually enticing young women, underage women, children, on the internet to expose themselves, to engage in sexually provocative pictures and gestures, and in his view, hopefully activities with him.
Right, correct.
So because of the nature of that scurrilous, disgusting, and disgraceful behavior, I would say that he's done for. As
Why
far as
I
the
ask you
political
that
scene.
question is because this is America.
It's hard to come
and-
back from that.
Yeah, and we always say forgive. If we come out and we admit that we made our mistakes and we're not perfect, we sort of forgive. I'm just wondering, legally.
Well, I like what you say about that. I'm glad you brought that up, because when we talk about Anthony Weiner in particular, he was forgiven. Don't forget, that wasn't his first foray
Yes.
into mischievous. He was first caught sexting adult women, sending pornographic pictures of himself to women over the internet and other means, and then denying it. And when they were reported and the pictures came out, his wife even tried to stick with him. That was the first scandal. Before he even tried to run for mayor. That's how he lost his position when he was a congressman. Then the wife stayed with him. Hillary Clinton didn't say much. Everybody kind of forgave and forgave.
yeah.
Right. You can make a mistake. The thing that is not what landed him in prison. It was the second act, when everything had cooled down and he decided he was going to run for mayor, even after the first scandal, and then he was caught having done the same thing but with an underage or several underage girls.
So that was it.
That was the clincher. That's why I say he sabotaged himself into jail. And that's what got him into jail. It wasn't that the sexually provocative pictures he sent to adults.
Oh, it was because
It was because of what he did to the children. That's right.
So under the penal law, is that what it's called?
I didn't hear the question, I'm sorry.
The penal law.
The penal law,
What
yes.
is such an offense, is it that it's so irredeemable that, he cannot be allowed to...
Well, there are a lot of restrictions. When you're convicted of what he was convicted of, he can't be around children or people under the age
He
of...
has to register as a
He
sex
has to
offender.
register as a sex offender, number 2. He can't live in certain areas near schools. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of monitoring that goes along with that just by the nature of what he's doing and how he has to be monitored would undermine any political office, I would think.
Isn't he an
He
attorney
can't
as
kiss.
well?
He can't go and kiss babies.
Is
No, I don't believe he was an attorney.
Oh.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't believe he's an attorney.
But I've known Anthony, not that I've known him a little bit. So I think it was a poor judgment that he exercised in whatever
Several
happened.
times, yes.
He repeated that. But don't count him out. I believe he will still find a way to come back to politics.
Well, I
That's
can
all
tell
he
you this.
knows, and he will come back.
He lost a lot. He lost his freedom. He lost his bride. He lost his reputation. And he lost the right to kiss babies. What kind of politician can't kiss babies?
I don't know. We'll soon find out, right?
And Anthony Weiner. And then he has that name, which doesn't help. Which doesn't help.
Well, only time will tell, but I think he still has interest in politics because I heard him when he came out, he says, I'm going to give back, try to work things out and, So the interpretation from the media was like, this guy is not done. And I believe he's not done.
He may have the ambition for politics and the love of politics, but the question becomes, does politics have a love for him? It's a two-way street.
Yes.
You see Montserrat came back?
Who?
Montserrat. He had a little bit of issue, but he did come
Domestic
back.
violence.
He's now a district leader in Queens.
Yes, but the nature of his offenses
But,
were not involving children.
Children, yeah.
See, that's the primrose path that you mustn't go down. Once you involve crimes against children, society looks at you a little bit different. I think there's a lot of things you can get away with, but once you start talking about enticing 13 and 12-year-olds into sexual activity, and you're a 40-something-year-old former congressman, married congressman, I think society gets kind of irked by that.
Because everybody has children.
Everybody has, or at least knows a child.
That's true.
That they could probably picture in that same vulnerable situation. So I think that's the thing that he has to overcome. I mean, you've had people commit all kinds of crimes, go to prison, come out, and continue to ascend in politics. Yes. But when you get convicted of situations involving underage girls or boys, it's kind of hard unless you're a Catholic priest to come back from that.
I like that. So,
am I wrong?
yeah.
I told you, put the tape when I start lying. I just tell the truth and keep it razzle dazzle.
So, Stephen James, tell me what are some of the hot topics of the week that I know we were speaking on the phone earlier this week and
Yes.
you wanted to discuss something was going on in Texas.
Well, there is a police officer by the name of Vera Cruz, De La Cruz. His name is Manuel De La Cruz, in a place called Baytown, Texas, who, while on Sunday, the 12th day of May, we, as a society here in America, were celebrating women and mothers in particular. We called it Mother's Day, although in my book, every day is Mother's Day and every woman is to be celebrated.
That's true.
But we as a nation were celebrating Mother's Day on Sunday, May 12, 2019. This person was having some sort of a feud back and forth with a woman named Pamela Jones in the Baytown community in which they both were residences.
Okay.
And no one knew this, of course, but they and maybe people surrounding that area, but the world didn't know for sure. However, on Monday, the day after Mother's Day, and this was on videotape because someone, there's always somebody with the camera or video or phone that can videotape things. Well, he was videotaped literally attacking this woman, putting her in what we call traditionally a headlock, and wrestling her to the ground. And the whole time, he wasn't saying much of anything, but she was heard on the tape, on the video saying, "Leave me alone, you're always harassing me, you're always bothering me, I'm pregnant." And upon her saying, "I'm pregnant," he unceremoniously released, before she said, "I'm pregnant," he had tased her with the electrical taser, which you hear and see in the video. Psst. Even the person who was recording the video made a very, very, I'm sure, to his now embarrassment and dismay, despicable comment of, he tased that bee. You understand? That was the comment of the person taping. However, to his astonishment and horror, she yelled after she was tased with that electrical prod, "I'm pregnant!" He then pulled out his revolver and pumped 5 bullets into her.
Oh my goodness.
and killed her right there in the spot. Unarmed, pregnant, black woman, white cop of Hispanic background.
Stephen, what is going on in this country? It seems like this is 2019, but some of the stories that I've been hearing over the past 10 years, it seems like we're going back to 1945, 1950s, and I'm trying to understand the mentality of these people that are, our officials and police officers, from their mindset.
Well, one of the problems, and this is going back to as long as I've been alive, almost 6 decades, is that police have paid little to no consequences for acts such as these. Killing innocent, unarmed black men was the typical order of the day without consequence to the aggressor, to the cop. However, now that has spilled over into our women and children. Think Tamar Rice. Think about all these young children who were literally gunned down by police while the police officer paid absolutely no consequence. Think Eric Garner, whose murderer, killer, Pantatello in Staten Island, it was no true bill submitted by the grand jury. They refused to even indict this guy and charge him with murder. Think of the chief who Pantatello worked for, who said that the death of Eric Garner, he said this 2 days ago under oath, because now this gentleman is going through departmental hearings, not criminal charges, departmental, to see if he should lose a day or two of pay for this killing. Well, the chief who this guy reports to said that at the time upon hearing the death of Garner, the chief said, "Oh, it's no big deal." That's a quote, and he said that 2 days ago, not 48 hours ago. During hearings in Staten Island.
Now, both of you are black men. Dr. George and Nora, what is your take on all of this? I mean, how do you feel as a black man in America? And how do you feel, Stephen, as a black man in America? Do you feel safe?
I mean, the position of black men in America is such that, incarceration, the mass incarceration, adversely impacts the African American community and other minorities. That has been documented through writing and so on and so forth. I remember a couple of years ago, maybe 15 or so, the case of Amadou Diallo from West Africa was killed in the vestibule.
I think he was from Ghana?
Yeah, he's from Guinea.
Guinea, okay.
Yeah, for something bullets, he was unarmed.
And he was innocent. He wasn't committing any crime, wasn't doing anything. He was going to his home.
He was killed. I remember the case of Elena Bompa.
That's going
a
back.
while back.
The eviction in the Bronx.
Yes.
84-year-old great-grandmother.
Great-grandmother. So there's a few.
Shot her dead.
What is that? The Sean Bell?
Sean Bell, yeah.
To Jamaica. Yeah. So has been documented cases. But above all, one thing that I think that we need to know that we have to find a way to love one another. I don't care if you're wearing uniform. Love is the only thing that's missing. Because if you love someone, you're not going to take their life. You're not going to be so malicious. So, to treat them with such ignominy.
Well, first you have to love yourself, though.
Yeah,
if you don't love yourself, then you're not going to love somebody else.
Yeah, you love yourself, but someone else that has power will hurt you, I don't care if they're armed officers or not, but there has to be accountability, But
and where does this accountability start?
It has to be, they say that justice delayed is justice denied.
It is.
Most of these cases, justice
Think
is not
Medgar
even,
Evers and Byron De La Beckwith on that statement.
These cases are already maybe the trial, the process, because minorities, as a minority, folks don't have enough money to get the adequate representation that you have to be able to, prove your case beyond all reasonable doubt, except you have somebody like our Sharpton speaking for you.
Oh, we have Stephen James.
Or Stephen James,
Yes, well, what I want to say, George, to a couple of the points you made in response to Lady P's question, I mean, I hear you saying, all we need is love, if I can quote the Beatles, and they started saying that back in the 60s, and here we are 50 years removed, almost 60 years removed from that song, and we still can't seem to find that love. And it seems like it's always in these stories the cases that you pointed out, that you stressed, and the others that I stressed, and others that both of us haven't even had a chance to mention, but there are so many, it's too many to mention, all have one thing in common. It's typically some white cop killing some unarmed black man, woman, or child. And when you say all we need is love, I don't think, to be honest with you, and all the respect to you, because I love you, brother, but I don't think that that's what's the missing piece. I think love is not the issue. I think if we had some consequences, that would be a good step in the right direction, because it is also documented through studies and history that when people fear consequences, it helps to make them think twice and stem their behavior. But in all the cases you mentioned, Amadou Diallo, Eleanor Bumpers, all of them, and the ones I mentioned, and the ones we didn't even mention, the one common denominator is that none of these cops were ever prosecuted. And that's a problem. There's no such thing as, if they loved you more, they wouldn't do this. So let's just assume they're going to hate us because that's been the history. I mean, let's just keep it razzle and dazzle and real. The history in this country is that from its inception over 200 years ago till today, there has been little to no period of respite from the onslaught of white racism against black people. It has taken various shapes and forms. It has sometimes been overt. It has sometimes been covert. It has been disguised. It has been in your face, but it has always been part of this nation's entree. And we have always been the victim. So I don't think the problem is that we don't love white folks enough.
And
I don't think the problem is that they don't love us enough. Love is not an issue. The problem is there has not been any direct response. We don't take up arms against them. We don't shoot them back. We don't go out hunting them. We don't do a lot of the things that they have done to us. And one of the reasons why they don't want us in power is because they fear that they will get what is known as comeuppance, things that they have quite rightfully earned through their mistreatment of us and people of color around the world. And another thing I have to add, you used the word minority. Well, I want to say this to you, and you're from the continent of Africa, Nigeria.
Right.
We are not a minority anywhere on the planet. We are the majority. People of color are the majority. So what they have done, again, through hatred and through an effort to advance white supremacy, is to convince well-educated, well-meaning good brothers like yourself, and they tried it with me as well, that we are a minority. But the reality of it is that you know your history as well as I do. Probably more, because you lived and grew up in the continent, and I didn't. I was robbed from there. I'm stolen from Africa. But you grew up there. You had the benefit of seeing black people in power, black people running their own country, black people. We don't have that benefit here. Even when Barack Obama was the president, he didn't run this country and he didn't have the power. And it was showed and demonstrated by the fact that for 8 years, he was in office, came and went, and black people are still in the very same position or worse than they were before he came into office.
Right.
So I say all that to say this. In an effort to increase white supremacy, they have divided us. You're African American, you're Nigerian, you're Ethiopian, you're this, you're that, you're Caribbean, you're Jamaican, you're Trinidadian, you're Haitian. But the reality of it is that none of those places they were all named by white people, okay? Each of those countries were named by white folk. And the only reason why they gave those separations is to keep you thinking that you're different from you. He's different from him. That country's better than that one. That country's a shithole country. We need more love. We need more power, and he needs to learn respect through getting some repercussions, whether it be through the justice system, which has failed us as a people from the time we were brought here from Africa, or whether it's been being through some other retaliatory measures. But the bottom line is, as long as there is no response, we will continue to be victimized as we have been.
So, I see your point. What I'm saying is that love is really something that is, goes back to the beginning of humanity. That, you know, for instance, within the context of the family, where you have love, there is this tolerance, accommodation. But in the larger society where we live now, we find ourselves hating each other. There's black against black. There's hatred within communities, African communities, different communities. So we have to
because
have
we
a
will learn.
solidarity. When we have this, we can be able to even advocate, you know, against the opposition or whoever is the, you know, oppressing.
None of that is by accident. All of that, as I said, was designed. You know, if you want to go back to Rhodesia, which was named after Cecil Rhodes, and then later renamed South Africa. But Cecil Rhodes, who people in this country honor as a great explorer and a great man, they even have something called the Rhodes Scholarship. And that's some supposedly prestigious title that one carries, and they get to go to Ivy League schools, and you're a Rhodes Scholar for the rest of your life. You're known as this smart, intelligent person. Well, Cecil Rhodes was one of the biggest slaveholders and biggest racists that ever was hatched from a cave woman. He's not somebody to be honored. Yet he took Rhodesia and named it after himself. When white folk were giving out land that we know as Africa and dividing Kemet, the one true continent, because Africa is not divided into 1,000 different countries. It's one land. But it's white imperialism that divided the land. The King of England and various monarchs said, I want that, and I want that. Okay, Cecil, you want that? Name it. Okay, I'll name it after myself. My name is Cecil Rhodes, Rhodesia. You understand?
Yeah, I think that's
that is the problem. We have to go back to the beginning. We can't start curing the problem with yesterday. We have to go back to finding out how did we get here to today and yesterday by going all the way back to the beginning, and who is at the crux of all this so-called hatred and malignment amongst us as a people that you just pointed out. Who's at the crux of it?
Yeah.
Who?
Yeah,
Who?
Okay, we're listening
Okay.
to
Yeah, so
Our
I think,
World.
you know,
Don't get me started because I was born at night, but it was not last night.
I think what you were referring to is the partition of Africa.
That's exactly what I'm referring to by Europeans.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to say it.
Right.
You know, they are guilty. They did this. They put you in this condition. They mess with your continent, meaning all of us, and they mess with your mind, meaning all of us. So if you have hatred for your brother yesterday, it doesn't start with, I hate my brother because he's from so and such. It starts with, how did we get these divisions? Why do we have places called Nigeria? Why do we have Nairobi? Why do we have Ethiopia? Why do we have Ghana? Why do we have Morocco in Northern Africa? I mean, why do we have these divisions? Because they came along without any respect for you at all as a people and just divided it up. They didn't, without regard to who was already there. And once they divided up, they commenced to killing the people and submitting their white supremacy in the minds of the people. That's why they still pray to white gods and white Jesuses and all that stuff in Africa and in America. But the Pope prays to the Black Madonna. Do not get me started, y'all. I know too much. They're going to have to get rid of me to stop me.
We are listening to Our World, Our Power Show, and we can also be heard on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, Google Play, and Caribbean Buzz Radio and TV. Let's continue.
She didn't say YouTube. I don't know why.
Oh, yes, like YouTube. I'm sorry. In how many countries we're?
178 countries translated into 11 languages. That's what they tell me.
All right. I love it. I love it. So, George, Onuorah, Dr. George Onuorah, let's go back to let's make this country great again. What does that really mean and entail?
Let's make this country great again is something that is attributed to Trump, the current president. Mm-hmm. So what does he mean? Only him knows. But I would assume that he's saying that because in his mind, you know, how he perceives things to be going, he will, especially after the presidency of Obama, 8 years, some folks felt that there has been a regression. There's all these new progressive changes, inclusion, that things needs to go back to the old ways, to affirming is that a supremacy? Or
Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to get you to say. Do not be afraid, George. What Let's Make America Great Again really means is cold talk to other people who are similarly like-minded, white supremacists, who want to take America back to the good old boy days where Negroes knew their place and the white man was God. Can we just talk plain and not dance around this stuff and not act like we scared? Just go out there and let it be known. We all know what Let's Make America Great Again means, because America was great in the eyes of the Donald Trumps of the world when his mother and father were dancing and prancing down the streets of Jamaica Avenue and Sutphin Boulevard for the KKK. That's what he's talking about. Let's make America great again. Let's take us back to the time where you Negroes were not presidents, where you Negroes were not mayors, where you Negroes did not talk back to massa, where you couldn't even walk on the same sidewalk as your white superior counterparts, where you were called boy even though you might have been 90 years old and the person you call him you boy might have been 9. That's what he's talking about. So he's saying in code and not so coded language, unless you really don't get it, that like making America great again is taking us back to the good old boy days where you knew your place, where the white man knew his place and where the people of color knew theirs. And that's what he's talking about. And sending these people back to the shithole countries that they came from. I'm quoting the president now.
Now, George, tell me now.
Am I wrong?
No, you're right. You're
Put
right.
tape over my mouth when I start lying.
No, you are definitely right. You're on target. But are we responsible for who we put into office, George?
Are we responsible for who we put in office? Yes. Everyone that the voters elect to serve, because they are really serving the interests of the people, are held accountable. If you are in assembly, every 2 years, you gotta come back for re-election. If you are in city council, every 4 years. So ultimately, all elected officials must be accountable to those that put them there. Unfortunately, by the time they get elected, they've already started planning to come back for the next term. And some of them, that's why I prefer that there's time limits in some of these positions.
So the bottom line is somebody wanted America to come back from the way it was. What do you say that? Because he got into office, so somebody voted.
Well, if I may chime in.
Yes, go ahead.
What I believe is that when Donald Trump announced his candidacy, initially most people didn't believe that he had a snowball's chance in heck of winning, even in the primaries. But he began in his candidacy being very gruff, very aggressive, very insulting, very rude. And there was an appeal to a sleeping yet one eye open constituency who admired that. Yeah. They wanted to see somebody come out what they call swinging and punching and not being a typical politician, but keeping it real, being the people's candidate. They wanted that type of style because after 8 years of Obama, white folks were tired. In that segment of white folks, not all, but the ones who admired the style of a Donald Trump. He was rude, he was brash, he was fussing and cussing at his rallies. He was encouraging the crowd to beat up the black folks who might have gotten in there, or anyone who disagreed with him, throw him out with some chance, beat him up, punch him, whatever. And there was a growing affinity for that type of candidate by that otherwise a white constituency who felt neglected or left out during the Obama years. So they wanted to have somebody that they can champion. And a lot of that were middle to lower income white males who influenced their families when it came to voting and political positioning. Obama was a Democrat, and he had beaten the Republicans twice, both in the initial campaign he ran and again in the re-election. So they were angry. And they felt that they were not being represented. They never tried being black for a generation. But they felt after 8 years that they had lost everything. That's where that attitude of make America great again, give us back our country again, comes from. And it was born during the Obama years, not because Obama was a bad president, not because he did anything. In fact, to show you how ignorant many of these people were and are, they didn't even realize that during the campaign of Donald Trump, when he was saying, oh, and I'm going to repeal Obamacare, that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act were one of the same. So a lot of these idiots voted against Obamacare, in essence, by voting for Trump, who promised to repeal it.
True.
Not realizing that that's their lifeline, that they themselves are beneficiaries of quote-unquote Obamacare,
Sure.
aka the Affordable Care Act, and that the entire time Obama was in office, the Republicans, if you recall, well, every week, we're going to repeal it, we got something better, and everybody would always say, well, what? Show us what you have.
Where is it?
And they never came up with anything. So Trump's slogan was, we're going to repeal Obamacare, and that constituency who were tired of looking at a black president and black people winning in office and running cities, etc., was saying, yeah. And they were showing up at those rallies in massive numbers saying, yeah, get rid of Obamacare and the N-word care,
Yes.
right? So that we're going to make America great again was the semicolon rest of the sentence to we're going to repeal Obamacare. We're going to repeal Obamacare, semicolon, and we're going to make America great again. But to show you how ignorant, and that's the word I'm going to insist on using, the constituency of Trump generally were and are, they voted against their own better interests because they didn't even realize until after he was elected, after Trump was in office and trying to go about the business of dismantling that healthcare program, that it was the same healthcare that they themselves were benefiting from,
Yes, they
that
do need it.
their grandmommies were benefiting from, that they, who are the majority of people on social services
That's true.
in the country, were benefiting from. Places like Appalachia, West Virginia, South Carolina, all these places were benefiting from so-called Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, George. However, in their own ignorance and lack of understanding of what they're getting, they thought Obamacare was something else that only Negroes were getting.
Exactly.
And of course, they were all for that being dismantled. Stop me when I'm lying.
Someone could have also said that Make America Great Again was, sometimes people respond to these catchy phrases, greatness, you would think, oh, he's going to decrease unemployment, he's going to change things. America was just going to be this great country.
Well,
So
can I ask you
that's-
something,
yeah.
George? What president that, since you have come to this country, and Stephen James, what president do you feel has done anything for black and brown people? Which president?
Since George has come to the country, when he came to the country, Ronald Reagan was the president.
Right.
Actually, okay, Jimmy Carter was handing to Ronald Reagan, yeah.
Well, I don't know what month you came here, but okay.
August, yeah.
Okay. But the point is that you came in 81, so I think Carter actually officially, he was dead by that point anyway. By 81, his presidency was completely undermined because of the Iran-Contra scandal,
Yes.
and the hostages. And it was Ronald Reagan actually who was encouraging they not release the hostages until after the election so that he could take credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened.
Right.
So I don't know what month you came, but it was around that
I
same
came
time.
in August. In fact, while I was on the plane coming, I had the Carter speaking.
Okay.
He says, I promised you 4 years ago that I will never lie to you. And I can't stand here and say that it doesn't hurt. And that was what he said. That was just as he was getting ready to transfer power to
Reagan. So he had already lost the election.
Yeah,
Well, that's why I
he
say,
lost it.
since you were
Yeah.
here, it wasn't Carter.
Yeah.
Basically, he was done for. It was Reagan.
But
I know my politics.
yeah, I
But
think,
you asked me that earlier.
yeah, I think I like President Clinton though, because he tried to address some of the issues that ultimately benefit black folks. He was more in the mode of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Great Society, the 1930s, to make the society better, to improve the life of minorities.
Well,
That's one thing that appealed to me.
now, George, I'm gonna have to tackle you on this now. Stephen.
Be gentle. He's not funny.
Stephen,
Yes, ma'am.
wasn't the incarceration rate went up?
Tripled under the great president. What's his name that you like? Clinton.
Clinton, yeah.
Yeah, under that great guy, massive incarceration skyrocketed for people of color. The prison industrial complex began to bust at its seams because there was so many people going to prison for 25 or more years. There was mandatory minimums that were imposed. Even under the horror of Ronald Reagan, we never thought that we would get a president that would be worse in terms of the effect that they had on our families and as people of color as a society until we met Bill Clinton.
Well, everybody thought Bill Clinton, he's white, but he's like the black president.
He played his saxophone on the Tonight Show for 2 seconds, and all of a sudden he's black. Listen, Bill Clinton, his favorite person or people is Bill Clinton. I don't even know if he likes the wife he's married to, the way he's treated her. But I can tell you that Bill Clinton certainly is not a black president, and he certainly didn't go out of his way to make black people benefit from his policies. In fact, his policies, despite what Joe Biden wants to say last week.
And what did he say last week?
That Bill Clinton's policies did not increase incarceration. It did not lead to massive incarceration because the incarceration, and this is where his foolishness is showing, only affected the states, not the federal sentencings. But it doesn't matter. If people are being sentenced to state prison for 25 years for holding a joint, what does it matter if you're going to state or federal prison?
Yeah, jail
It's
is
the,
jail.
and it's the policy that's set from the top that dictates how the states respond. So Joe Biden tried to say that, and the reason why he did that, not because he was defending Bill Clinton, but because he voted for it while Clinton was president. He voted for the mandatory minimums, the increased sentencing guidelines federally for for crack cocaine over powdered cocaine, and these things. So these guys who stand up taking vows that they did so much for black people, when you really look at their record, and you don't even have to look that closely, you can see exactly what they did, and much of what they did was actually worse than an avowed, publicly known racist like Ronald Reagan.
Wow. That's very interesting when you put it in that
So
context.
which president do you say?
None of them.
None of them.
None of them. That's why black people and people of color are still in the same socioeconomic position that we were in all your life. We are still the highest level, carry the highest percentage of unemployment in the nation, always have. Now we're at, for people between the ages of 16 and 25, I think it's something like 70% unemployment, real numbers. How many of us, even in this studio, know 20 young black people between those ages who are employed?
That's true. Or if they are employed, have good paying jobs.
Yeah, you can say minimum wage jobs, which are not independent, cultivating jobs. You can't get an apartment if you're making whatever it is, $15, $30 an hour.
No, you can't.
Because apartments in New York one bedroom start $2,000 and up in Queens.
True. So you can't get a job working at McDonald's or Burger King.
And call yourself employed, really. You might be able to take some of the stress and strain off your host, whether it be a parent or someone else that you're living with, grandparent, friend. You can maybe pay the electric bill,
Correct.
But you cannot yourself be independent. So why are we still in that condition in 2019 if these people did so much? So I can't name anybody really to answer your question, and I could even go back before George was here. When George was still in Nigeria, I was here dealing with what we still are dealing with now. And a lot of it is neglect, benign neglect. Who was the person who quoted that? Can anyone out there tell us? I see we have people calling in and listening in through Facebook. Can any of you tell us who was the architect? This was a socio-economic plan here in New York on the federal level of benign neglect. Meaning, if you have a cut on your hand, don't do anything to make it worse. Don't pour salt in the wound, but you don't give it a salve either. You don't clean it out. You don't put any sort of healing agent on it. You just benignly neglect it, and you know that neglect by in and of itself will cause deterioration. That was the strategy in Harlem. It's not an accident that Harlem is now a boom town. You can't even afford an apartment up in Harlem anymore. You can't buy a brownstone unless you're a millionaire. But how come throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and part of the 90s, before they decided to take Harlem back, quote unquote, why was Harlem allowed to fall into blight when you had open heroin markets on the streets? Why?
Do you see that happening here in Queens, especially in South Jamaica, Queens?
You asking George?
No, I'm asking both of you.
I was here, I can tell you. Go ahead.
Maybe you can answer because
I was here. I mean,
to...
South Jamaica, Queens, if you recall, and you're a young lady, so this is probably before you were born, was, again, that what happened in Harlem was very similar to what happened in the 70s and 80s here in South Jamaica. From Hillside Avenue, all with the courts and the major city works, Con Ed, Social Security, telephone, all those court system, family court, Supreme Court, traffic court, landlord tenant court, all these things are the hub of Queens at all times. But from Hillside all the way down to the end of Sutphin, which goes all the way to Rockaway Boulevard in the south, it was an open air drug market through the 70s and 80s. Most of your major known, almost legendary drug dealers came from Southside. But when they say Southside, they're talking about Sutphin Boulevard between, I'd say, Liberty Avenue and south, all the way down to Conduit or Baisley. That was an open air market where people became millionaires dealing drugs. It was because of benign neglect of the communities that these things were allowed to flourish. What do I mean? Well, we won't put drugs physically into the community, but we know that they're getting in, and we know that people are getting strung out. We know that families are being destroyed. We know that young women are prostituting themselves to support these habits, and young men are robbing and stealing and end up in state prison to support these drug habits. So we won't do anything to exacerbate that. We simply won't do anything to cure it either. We'll let them get hooked on drugs. They'll do what they do to support the drugs, commit crimes, and then we'll take the criminality and incarcerate it. And what do? You take them out of the community, incarcerate them upstate. Their families are neglected. Upstate, you get employment because now you're building more prisons. So all these little towns, Ossining and Syracuse. Well, there's no prison in Syracuse, but Ossining, Onuorah, all these upstate towns that have prisons, downstate. Elmira, New York, has Elmira Prison. All these places, you can make a boom now for these families who live up there because now their families are being employed by the
because of the prison.
By the prison system. So you have 3, 4, 5 generations of prison guards.
All right. We're here at 607-301-0962. If you want to call in, I didn't mention it earlier, 607-301-0962. And we're listening to Our World, Our Power here with Dr. George Onuorah and Stephen James, attorney at law, attorney at war, and Lady Pauline.
Now you know why I'm attorney at war. Getting a little bit of a flavor of why they call your made man the attorney at law and attorney at war, because I'm a 5-star general in the war for truth, Lady P, for justice, Brother George, and equality. That's me, your made man.
All right, and we're here on Saturdays from 5 to 6 on Caribbean Buzz, radio, and TV. And again, just to remind you all, if you want to hear us afterwards, you can hear us on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, and Google Play. Thank you.
She doesn't like to say YouTube.
Oh, yes, YouTube.
And Facebook.
And Facebook. Yes.
Girl, you're going to have to get an announcer to take your spot. No. In other words, we're on all the major platforms.
And again, how many channels?
Over 178 countries.
Countries.
Translated in over 11 languages. Heard on 3 continents. It's just out there for you. There's no excuse not to hear us because we're everywhere. So go there and get you some.
All right. Thank you, audience, for another week of powerful information from Our World Hour of Power.
And thank Brother George for
Yes,
coming out.
George, Dr.
Imparting
George.
that knowledge.
It's a pleasure to come and
Dr. G.
hear you talk about the law and some of the things,
Law and disorder.
growing up in this country, so
It's
Yes.
great. It's
Yes.
great. It's a powerful hour. That's why we
Yes.
call it the hour of power.
Make that hour count.
Yes.
That's right. Get it in.
All right. Thank you, listeners. Catch you next week.